Hi, I'm Waynette Cabral, and the session that I facilitated was how to get a seat to the table. One of the things shared was having a shared partnership with stakeholders, building a strong foundation with stakeholders, using hot topics or emerging issues in your state to bring people together or to get at the table, and having that whole attitude of respecting others and agreeing to disagree. And if all things fail, if you can't get to the table, create your own table and bring the stakeholders together at your table.
Hi, I'm Paul Jarvis. I'm the public policy staff person with the Ohio DD Council. I was in the breakout session for how to get a seat at the table. We had a great discussion, and generally most councils in my session felt that they were getting a seat at the table, but they were struggling to identify ways to measure intangible outcomes, such as we got a call before a bill was introduced, or the designated state agency director called us and asked us for our opinion. Those count as seats at the table because your input is being sought, but how do you quantify that? That was one of the biggest issues in our session.
Hi, my name is Eva Rooks. I'm the Planning and Communication Manager at the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council. In our breakout session, we really had a chance to learn from each other what other councils might be doing that we might to try in our own state. And I came out with probably as much information or more than the participants did. So it felt like it was a really good learning experience.
Hi, I'm Angela Lello, and I was here today talking about why it's important for DD councils to get a seat at the table. And what we talked about were the different reasons why DD councils need to be at the table in order to help create the systems change that they're set up in the DD Act to create. And so we gave examples of not just legislative systems change, but we also talked a lot about when different policies such as Medicaid waiver policies or special education policies are developed, and how using relationships and being a key expert on different policies will help DD councils, their members and their staff, get involved in the policy-making discussions that happen outside the legislative arena as well as inside that process.
Hi, I'm Darcy Robb with the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. I just had the privilege of facilitating a session on getting a seat at the table, and I think the quote that sums up our session was that we're seeing a tidal change, and it's very exciting. The tidal change is going from the me to the we, and that's because we can't afford to be just me all by ourselves anymore.
I'm Anna Labosco. I'm with the New York State Developmental Disabilities Planning Council, and I filled in for Jennifer Johnson on the performance measurement breakout session. And I was just struck by the fact that we have some incredible colleagues, and they have a great deal of insight into our work, and also that there's a great deal of not clarity. And I really like the idea that they could feel free to ask their questions as they saw fit. In particular, their concern about what we count, why we count, and why there are so many more pieces than what we actually get reported on the federal level. So this is really exciting to be able to go through this with them.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Matney with NACDD ITAC, and the session on logic models, the best thing about the session was the hands-on opportunity for participants to be able to actively work through a logic model. And I think the big takeaway for the participants was just realizing the importance of breaking down the activity and the outputs separate from the short-term outcomes, intermediate, and ultimately the long-range impact.
Hi, I'm Ann Trudgeon from the Oklahoma Developmental Disabilities Council, and our session was on internal and external evaluation methods. I think the main points that came out of it were that evaluation takes a lot of time and thought to plan, that councils need to give themselves a little bit of a break and a little credit for the work that they're working really hard to get done. It also highlighted, however, that the draft AIDD measures are still not really outcome focused, and we're wondering from our session if those might need to again be revised to be more outcome focused. And finally, we had a request from our group to create a repository of outcome tools and evaluation tools that councils were using. So I hope that that will be online soon on the ITAC site.
I'm Brian Koch from the Maryland DD Council, and in our breakout session on the PPR, we talked more about what AIDD is looking for in PPRs, and we had a lot of really good discussion and input that will be helpful to ITAC and AIDD in improving technical assistance to councils so we enhance our PPRs next year.
Hi, my name is Marion Vessels, and I'm the director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. And I just did a session on accessible meetings and conferences. In our session, we talked about how to provide a truly inclusive environment for all people with disabilities. We talked about location for your meeting. We talked about the setting for the meeting, how accessible the design of the seating is and how important that is. We talked about making sure that your communication was fully accessible when you're looking at registering people, and your website, your materials to register people. How do people get there? To and from. Is the setting very accessible for walking? Can people get out of the hotel or site and go someplace different? We talked about making sure that our trainers are fully accessible and are inclusive of people with disabilities. Our food service is designed to include all people with all different kinds of disabilities, food allergies. And then we talked about making sure that it was an appropriate environment for all of our attendees. So things like relief areas for service animals. Most people found that that was very helpful, and they added lots of really good other suggestions. One of them was that for their council meetings, they do pre-sessions, so that anybody has any questions, they can come to it, and folks with intellectual disabilities get a little more time to investigate the time and use the time they need to be able to figure out the issues at hand.
Hi, I'm Joe LaMountain, and I led a session on increasing the impact of your communications with policymakers, and we talked about ways to improve your communications by framing your messages in a certain way, and actually by increasing their impact by communicating on a personal level. Thought the feedback from folks was great. We had a really good conversation, and folks shared their personal stories. I think the best story we heard was from a woman who organized a flash mob of self-advocates, and were able to generate a lot of attention from folks in the legislature, and were able to start a lot of conversations about disabilities and some of the issues that they were working on.
Hello, my name is Joshua Riff, and I'm from the Wisconsin Council, and I co-presented with Emma Schouts from Tennessee and Barb Dodd from Virginia. The title of our presentation was Outreach Through Social Media and Beyond. We talked about various social media tools that people can use to get their message out. We touched on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we also talked about Constant Contact and social media management tools like Hootsuite. Then we discussed all of the things that the DD Council Communicators Work Group is doing to increase the effectiveness of council communication nationwide.
Hafaday, I'm Lynn Tydenko from the Guam Developmental Disabilities Council, and I'd like to let you know that it's okay to embrace your disability and do positive things with it. We're self-advocates in action, and there ain't no stopping us now.